It's March Mania at Sports Interaction.
Wow.
NHL, NBA, March Madness, MLB, so much more. It's bananas. Bananas.
That was good spelling.
Thank you. Play Pinata Picks and Minute Madness exclusive games with insane odds you can't play anywhere else. Make your next bet at Sports Interaction. Download the app in Ontario. Use the QR code at the bottom of the screen. Or head to sportsinteraction.com/STPN to get started. It's 18 plus. Please play responsibly.
Welcome to Nailing the Apex. I'm Tim Hauraney. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. Rate a review as it really helps us grow the show. You can follow me on social media at Tim Hauraney. We've got a great show lined up for you today because I'm happy to say that we've been joined by IndyCar driver racing for Juncos Hollinger Racing. It's Callum Ilott. Callum, thank you for doing this. How are you?
Hi, Tim. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm good. I've been spending my time in Indianapolis. It's a bit cold at the moment, but training a lot, getting ready for the season. IndyCar's a tough one, so we have to do quite a bit of training.
Okay, so training, let's start there. So when you're not driving race cars, Callum, you can also catch him on his podcast with Marcus Armstrong called The Side Pod, and I believe that's on your Screaming Meals network.
Yep.
It's good, dude. I listened to it and really, really liked it, man. But
it's a bit chaotic, I think. That's what the feedback I got. But no, we wanted to do something. Obviously, Marcus was more in charge of the Screaming Meals stuff, especially when he was in Europe. And I said that was a bit off the rails for my kind of style. I'm not too keen on that. But yeah, if you're down to do something a bit more serious and a bit more showing and sharing of our experiences. So yeah, we focused a bit on more the Formula 1, Formula 2 side, as I've dabbled in a bit of Formula 1 and we've both done Formula 2. And then we do highlight the IndyCar side as well. But we want to kind of start it off covering quite a bit of racing and then, I would say bounce off into different areas. But yeah, if you want to give it a listen, please join us. But, I'm not going to take away from you guys here.
No, they should. It's really good, man. I really enjoyed it. Last time, so when I drove Champ Car, Atlanta car, so we're going back, that car was really physical. And I was in super good shape, dude. But, Marcus on the podcast, saying that, I believe it was he thought that the Grand Prix of St. Pete was going to be more physical than it was. My question for you is, does he just possess superhuman physical strength?
No, this is where it's a bit of. Do you mind if I swear?
Yeah, go for it.
A bit of bullshit because he really struggled in F2. So I think that shows maybe what he's driving a bit more. Than his actual fitness. No, he's a super fit guy. He does spend a lot of his time training. But I've done the F2 side, and I found that a lot easier than this IndyCar stuff. And him, it's the opposite. I think he found the F2 stuff harder than the IndyCar stuff. So I'm like, okay, I'm clearly missing something here because I'm training a hell of a lot more than I was in F2. So yeah, it's a bit misleading, and I need to probably recover that in the next 2 episodes. But it makes me look really unfit. But that's not the case. I've been training every day last 2 months since I've been in Indy. So yeah, he's misleading it a little bit. But at least from my side, especially talking about it, it shows how physical and hard it is. St. Pete for me, it's almost a 2-hour race, maybe 1 hour 45 minutes. I averaged 150 BPM the whole way through, and that's with afterwards when I was cooling down for a good half an hour as well. Maximum of 198, super hot, sweating like crazy. I don't even know the weight difference from start to finish, but I know that during the race I had 1.5 liters of water, and then I came in and I had 2 bottles of water, a Gatorade, and I think half a Coke before I even went to the toilet. That's how much I'd probably lost, and I was still thirsty later that day. So it's pretty incredible. And I was drinking all the way through the race and felt fine. Obviously high heart rate and stuff, but I'm used to that. I normally have quite a high heart rate when I'm racing. So.
Man, you must have burned over 1,500 calories for sure.
To 2,600. Yeah, in a kind of 2.5, 3 hour window. It was very impressive, I have to say.
What did you eat afterwards? Did you at least get a burger or something? I don't know if you eat meat or whatever, but did you at least have a good meal afterwards?
What did I have that night? I think I had a good steak, that's for sure. I think Sunday night I had a steak. But no, after that I kind of just try and get a good amount of sugar in me just to recover the kind of blood sugars. Obviously it destabilizes it a bit, but so I just straight on to some snacks, and then maybe whatever I had left over from the lunch I'd eaten at 10:30, 11 o'clock that morning, because it's weirdly timed. But yeah, it's incredibly physical. I think people really underestimate it. I definitely underestimated it last year when I arrived. But that's the way it is. You have to do it.
Wait till he gets to Toronto. Scorching heat, 90 minutes, flat out on the streets of Toronto. It's bumpy, no cautions. I think Marcus will see what's up then.
But St. Pete for me is, for the heat, or Nashville or St. Pete was the worst. I know Toronto can be bad at the right time. But I think if he was alright at St. Pete, he'll be alright in most places. At the moment, obviously, he's not doing the ovals, so it's a shame he misses out on the doubleheader at Iowa, because that's quite a tough one as well. My back that Sunday, I was dying on the drive home. I drove home 6 hours that night as well.
Wow.
So I just I need to take it, give myself a rest sometimes.
Speaking of ovals, what's obviously the 500's pretty awesome, but like coming from European racing, like what were you expecting when it came to ovals?
You know what? I'll start with this because I was in Texas last week with Augustine, trying to help him, and it was quite funny because he came in from the first proper run and was like, "This is just stupid. Like, why am I here doing this?" And I had a very similar reaction when I jumped in. My first reaction when I came in was, whoever thought of the idea to drive around in circles at the fastest possible way is fucking crazy. So yeah, I sympathize with that. Obviously, I got more used to it. Look, I loved Iowa and Gateway last year. I think that was great. The short ovals for me was closer to home and more like a higher speed corner with more downforce. The speedways definitely was. I still don't think I got used to. Even by the time we'd finished with Indy, I didn't feel like I was used to it. But I'm interested now to go back to Texas after a whole year of kind of ovals and that, and really see where I'm at, because I'll be a hell of a lot more comfortable. And those were the first two races. You've got Texas, which is quite a tough one to jump into, and then Indy, and then actually the easier ones, in my opinion, are the later ones. So it's not easy. But yeah, for those who don't know, you have Texas, which in qualifying you're kind of averaging 220 miles an hour for 2 laps. You have Indy where it's 230 for 4 laps. I mean, Scott Dixon holding the record now, or P2 on the record, I'm not sure, at 234 miles an hour, which is insane. And then you go to Iowa, which is like 185, maybe 180, and Gateway, which is a bit in the middle because you've got a very high speed corner and then a kind of more hairpin road coursey. But Texas is super high banked. You come in dizzy after every run because of the amount of G-force you pull, especially in turns 3, 4. Again, I don't know why the Americans label it 1, 2, and 3 and 4. It should be 1 and 2, but whatever. I'm not going to complain. So for you Europeans, yes, ovals have 4 corners, even though there's only 2. But yeah, that's it. It's intense. It's super intense. It's a long race. I had cramp in my shoulder. Last race, last time there, my water wasn't working, so it was a hell of a long race to finish P16 for.
Qualifying for the 500, I was talking to, who was I talking to? Scott McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Took his left foot, put it on his right foot, hold it down.
Yeah. I did that in Le Mans when I was
Okay.
racing the GT. I mean, I started to cramp up in my right foot 3 hours into the stint, and you're like that, but I would not be doing that in Indy. I think like lap 4 qualifying, that car is not nice. The tyres just start to go and you start floating towards the wall. I mean, fair play to him. I think he's probably not the only one to do that.
Oh, yeah, it's
Sato looks like he was someone to do that, especially when he hit the wall and carried on going flat into the next corner.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be another level of crazy to do that. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I had to have a bit of a mentality change. I think one of these questions I saw on Twitter, like looking at it now from when I was in junior single seaters, did I ever think I would be doing this, driving over 200 mile an hour in ovals. No, I didn't. I thought everyone doing it was mental, and then here I am doing it. So yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, again, it's kind of one of those things that you just have to get on with, and my attitude to it was like, yes, it's dangerous. Of course, it can easily go wrong. But if I haven't experienced it, how can I say no? You know, like I can't. I have to decide for myself and do it. And yeah, I mean, the super speedways, I still have my hesitations. It's not easy to be driving 230 miles an hour side by side with someone. You have to have full trust in them and full trust in yourself, because even at that speed, it's hard to stay inches next to someone, even yourself. You know, imagine on a motorway, it's hard not to weave, or an interstate, whatever you call it here. It's not easy on the racetrack either. So that's tough for me, and learning who you can do that with and who you kind of can't is not easy for a first timer as well. But I've built up. But yeah, I thought everyone was stupid who did this. I mean, I understand the F1 drivers' hesitation when they look at Indy and go, yeah, it's a bit too dangerous for me. I understand that. I'm in the situation now where I'm not really bothered by it, but I also understand and respect the dangers of it. It's incredible, and you know, even the tiniest mistakes can have massive effects. As I found out, I was sitting out for a weekend after the Indy 500 after I broke my hand, and yeah, that was just a simple mistake caught out by the wind, you know, on older tires, and next thing you know, you're around, and before you even realize you're around, you're in the wall, and then you're sliding in, and then you hit another wall, and yeah, lots of pain.
I always found with Indy and, you know, some of the F1 drivers, it's kind of like, one of the things with it is like, as you build up to it, right? Like it's kind of like, I mean, for European drivers who've raced at, I don't know, we use Jeddah because they're just coming off of that. That's kind of like a track, you know, you gotta build towards, and you know, the 500 is no different, right? At IMS, that's a similar type of mentality. Can you just explain that a bit? I mean, because some people may not understand by building up to something to get the confidence to go flat through turn one or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's like different stages to this. So like take turn one, for example, you know, that's the one where as a rookie, the first stage is to go flat through there, and then once you get there, you can work around. I mean, there are 4 corners which are all meant to be identical, but they're all kind of their own individual corners. You know, like turn 2 is hands down the most difficult because it's where the grandstands open up and there's a little gap where the wind can get you. For some reason, there's maybe a little bump or a crest on the exit, and that's where most people crash. That's where I crashed. That's where everyone crashed in the race, to be fair. 3-4 is meant to probably be one of the easier ones. You know, I think that one is a great one to build up to. And then the last corner, you know, it's some people get caught out, some people not. That's quite a difficult one in traffic, a lot of understeer. But turn 1 is the first one you kind of get to, and I would say, like, there's one thing in practice when you know you've got so much downforce, especially starting, where they're like, yeah, this should be flat. You know, I wouldn't worry about it. It's just all to yourself, and you need to build up. And you go out and you do, like, obviously the installs, you come back in the pits, you go back out, and you get to that turn 1, and you start, and you kind of go, I think I need to lift. Like, it's not gonna stick. And then you end up full lifting the first time, and it doesn't feel great because you full lifted, you've changed the pitch of the car, and when you change the pitch of the car, you lose a bit of downforce, and it's not good for the car, destabilizes it. Then the next time you're like, okay, I'm gonna come, and then you get to about like 40%, okay, feels more comfortable, right, now let's go. And then you get to that point where you go to be flat, and you do this called driver flat, where you're hesitating a little bit, and it's 95% throttle, and then at that point it's like, okay, now it's flat, I'm just going to pin it and go. And of course, the older the tires get, the more risky that becomes. But that's kind of the goal that you're working up towards. And you know, some drivers, when they're told it's flat, are able to just go and do it. Some know that they can do that, but you know, want to build up, and some struggle with it. Some can't do it. Of course, most people end up doing it anyway. What's difficult is when you go to qualifying and you've got those 4 laps and you're trimmed out like crazy. The trimming out means taking the downforce off. you know that the car can do it, right? But you have like two factors. Well, actually a few more. You've got the wind, you've got the temperature, and you've got the fact that, to be honest, even if it's meant to be balanced, sometimes the COP, which we call the center of pressure, right, which is the difference between front and rear downforce, sometimes that can be out, and sometimes the car can't be set up well. And if it's out by a little chunk of a point of percentage, you can find yourself turning in and you'll be turned around and hitting that wall, and you won't know. And that's where you've got to have trust in the team and trust that everything goes well. So going out and you go into qualifying and knowing that you have to do turn one flat, but you don't know if it's going to stick or not, right? And once you do it flat, you know you can do the next two laps for sure pretty flat, and the fourth one's going to be difficult. But it's that trust, you know, you have to do it flat, otherwise your qualifying's ruined because you're just wasting speed. And that's tough. That's a real... that's where to be honest, probably even me actually, maybe I did it, but this is where I can understand Scott's thinking, is where you have to be flat. And once you've done it flat, you're good. So once I've got through that turn one, the rest of it's easy. But also, if you go through turn one loose on that first lap and the car's moving, you're done. I mean, like, that's a box moment if it's loose on the first lap. So yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy, and it's a big psychological thing. And to be honest, it's even tough for me to describe, and I hope the listeners can understand what I'm talking about. But it's another level doing it. Yeah, and conditions change every single day, and you have to have trust. Sometimes you don't get much running. I mean, the Fast Friday, which after a whole week of testing, we then have this Friday where the boost gets turned up on the engines, and you've got an extra like 70 to 100 horsepower. I'm not sure what it is. Well, when we had it last year, it was like 40 mile an hour winds, so no one wanted to go out. I think we did 1 or 2 runs, and then you're going into qualifying the next day. Jesus Christ, like it's not nice, you know. You've got to trust it, and you're not perfect with the car, but you've got to finish it. I mean, my 4th laps in qualifying were on the limit, as many others were as well. But you know, it's all part of it. It's why you get paid the big bucks, I guess, to just hang it out to dry in that sense.
Badass, man. It's so cool. What else I want to ask you about IndyCar before we switch gears here? Favorite track so far that you've done on the IndyCar calendar, and we'll remove IMS from that. Anything outside of IMS, what's been your favorite track?
Well, IMS isn't my favorite. The wool hurts there. I'm not in good relationships with her at the moment. So for ovals, it's Iowa. I really enjoyed that weekend. I hated the testing there. The testing was shocking. But then I went to the race weekend. I was like, I love this. It's great. Road courses, I think Road America, that really stood out to me as a great track. Barber and Laguna as well, close up there, but they were great. Mid-Ohio is a tough one, but Road America stands out. And then with the street circuits, Long Beach is a great atmosphere, but I think I enjoyed Toronto, and also for us as a team, that's where we kind of started to click a bit more on the street circuits. So it's nice when things come together a bit and you can enjoy the track a bit more because it's working a bit better.
So you've raced against some of the best of the best in motorsports, man, and you've beaten pretty much almost all of them.
A few, most of them. There's most still a few I'd like to beat.
Right. Okay. Toughest competitor.
Look, I've had a couple.
You've got some good teammates too.
Yeah, no, going through it I have, but I think there's a couple, because I don't ever like to single anyone out on this side, but throughout my years, me and Lando have been, up until he obviously progressed to F1, we kind of did different paths but came together at certain years. So 2014 in karting, we were racing together, and he was mega good. If that makes sense, yeah. Sorry, my English is
no, it makes total sense.
Dodgy. Then we came back together 2017 F3, and he was a rookie at the time. I'd done 3 years in F3, but at the same time he'd done 4 years in cars, so I'd had 3 years of experience versus 4 years. Right. You know, it was interesting to see the different paths come together, and actually, to be fair, I mean, even at 9-10 years old, we were racing together in karting as well. So again, 2014 we came together at the pinnacle of karting, and then again in F3. So he was super competitive, and hands down one of the best drivers I've seen. George, I raced against. We were teammates in 2015 in Carlin. He was 2016 F3 with High Tech. But I think for him it wasn't clicking at this time. He was showing potential, but then when he went to GP3 with ART, it just clicked, and he became, I think, just put it together and became the kind of driver that he is now. I think 2018, Antoine Hubert, he was super impressive because we'd been teammates back in 2016 as well, and he was a bit raw around the edges at that time, and in a certain way I had the upper hand by quite a bit in 2016. I came in 2018, I was like, shit, okay, you've stepped it up, and when a driver improves that much, I also have a lot of respect for them, and that was super impressive for me. So he was one of those ones that I think when he got the understanding of it was super good, and what he did with Arden in 2019 before the event was mega. I think that they really struggled, and he was able to get the most out of that car and more. And then I've been around a lot of other guys, even if it was just for one race. But yeah, I obviously 2020 I was against Schumacher, Sonoda, teammates with Guan Yu Zhu, who's doing well in Alpha at the moment. Guan Yu Zhou. I mean, I call him Joe. I mean, that's what we've always called him. I mean, even the younger side of things. Kind of did a couple of races in karting with Verstappen, Leclerc, I think maybe even Ocon.
You did FIA F3 with Leclerc, right?
Yeah, Leclerc, that was Leclerc finished 4th in the championship, Giovinazzi 2nd.
That's what it was.
Rosenquist won it, 3rd was Jake Dennis. Right. I think George was like 7th or 8th. Yeah. Albon was 7th or 8th.
That was what, 2015, if I remember correctly? Yeah. Okay, so you're coming right out of karts into those cars?
Yeah, straight into Formula 3. Dude. I was with Red Bull at the time, and Max had just done it in 2014, albeit with a lot more testing than I got.
Yeah, he had a ton, I heard.
I sat down with him in the middle of 2014, and he was like, so how old are you? And I'm like, 15. He's like, so you can do Formula 3 next year. Okay, we sort it. You go. I'm like, oh shit. Okay, right. Let's go. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. Super stacked grid. If you guys who know racing want to go and look at that year, I mean, we had some legends. Even Mahavir Raghunathan was in this grid. It was 36 drivers, super competitive. And for a first year, I didn't do a bad job, but obviously I didn't do the job that was expected after Max, and I split with Red Bull at the end of that year. But
here's a few, Callum. Like, I just pulled it up. Here's just a few. So this is Rosenquist. This is 2015 FIA F3. So Rosenquist won, Giovinazzi 2nd, Jake Dennis, Charles Leclerc, Stroll, George Russell, Alex Albon, Maximilian Gunther, Ferrucci, yourself, Sergio Sete Camara, who eventually, I think he finished 3rd in 2019 F2, I believe.
Fourth, I think. Cause,
so was it 4th? Okay, so I mean, like, that's a stacked field, dude. Like,
oh yeah, no, it was ridiculous, and like, there's even more. There's WEC champion Gustavo Menezes. He was a teammate at the time. We've got Ferrucci.
Nick Cassidy was in there.
Cassidy was in there.
Arjun Maney.
Yeah.
Dorian, is it Buckalaki, I believe you can pronounce it?
Buckalacci, I think.
Buckalacci. I mean, there's some, even the guys further down, like, there's a ton of talent on here,
Fitzpatrick
man.
was in it as well. Yeah. No, it was impressive. It was tough.
That's crazy, man. Good for you.
I enjoyed it a lot, though. It was good.
For sure, all the things you must have learned. Moving over, we'll talk some F1 real quick before we get some questions. Let's talk about Ferrari. Dude, what's going on with your former team? I mean, come on. The race pace was shocking after Jeddah. Like, shocking.
I don't know. Look, the problem you have is with Formula One is that everything is 2 years in advance, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
all of this development would have been done 1 or 2 years ago. So, which is tough for someone like Fred, because you're trying to make changes, but those changes impact it in a year or two. It's very hard to make quick changes. And I'm pretty impressed to see what he's doing and the rate of change from what I understand, because it's a bit speculation. I'm not there. I don't know. Yeah. But from what I hear, it's rather impressive what he's doing and how he's changing things. But of course, that effect will be later on. The race pace isn't amazing. I think I saw a stat earlier that it was relatively similar to last year, whereas even Mercedes improved, Red Bull have improved massively, and obviously Aston have astronomically. So in that, it's very similar. It's tough. It's super tough. I think they got a bit done on strategy with the safety car. I mean, no one was expecting that safety car. It wasn't really planned, of course. And then I don't think it even should have been a safety car, but not my area. I think it's amplified by how well Aston is doing. That's another 2 places that you're potentially going to lose. Merc it's close, but it's tough. They've got so much behind them and such a great team that it's in such a way you only fall harder when it's not going well. So I do feel sorry for the guys there.
And everyone, I mean, and you can agree or disagree on this, but I mean, like, everyone keeps saying it's only been 2 races, right, Callum? And it's like these things can turn around quite quickly, especially now the way that the regs are with Formula One and cap on wind tunnel testing time, and then you've got your cost cap on top of that as well. And, if you take a look at Aston Martin last season, I mean, they started off as slowest car on the grid, arguably one of.
I think their race pace was really good, though. So quality pace, I would agree. But if you looked, especially at the end of the year...
that's what I'm getting at. So once you see how that development curve goes off, right? Like, they get to Spain, they get a massive upgrade, and then it's kind of like every upgrade they get from then on out is almost like they're hitting home runs with it. Like, everything started to work. Cars started to work better. And I think, like, that's the thing that I've been looking at with this regulation of Formula One now, is that even though Ferrari is where they are, and I think they're probably about, 2/10 in quali, and then maybe, 6/10 in the race?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't even look at that, because I don't think Red Bull is 100%. I mean,
according to Christian Horner, they were flat out in the race.
Yeah, so. I would say that too. But they look astronomically fast in the race.
Good. But they can close. But Ferrari can close. I mean, some of these teams can close that gap, don't you think? I mean,
sure.
not massively, but I mean, they can get closer.
So take Mercedes last year, right?
Yeah.
They really
example.
struggled beginning of the year, massive complaining, and actually, to be fair, was a midfield team first couple of races. But you see again, like you said, around Barcelona. They just are able to fine-tune their car and get it into window, albeit it wasn't the best package in the world, but they fine-tuned it and got it there. Remember, over the winter, they've had to turn the car around and go with Plan B, which, takes some time. But I think, given that the starting point is already slightly better, I know they had all this speculation of it, but the starting point is already better, in my opinion. That they should, if they improve at the rate they did last year, which was very, very good, bearing in mind they were finishing on the podium at the end of last year, they will have a good finish to this year. And I know that they can do it because they showed it last year. But the other thing for me, when we talk about Ferraris, you have the Bahrain testing. Bahrain is a very individual circuit, quite low speed combined, only one high speed corner, so you don't really get the feeling for all the weaknesses. But it's a good place to test. Barcelona is probably the best one, which is why everyone was always going there. But you get a feeling for it. So if you can understand what the weaknesses are there, great, and you can implement that. But you have to do the testing, probably spend 2 weeks analysing before you can get a solid idea, which is already after the race anyway, of where you're lacking and where you need to improve. Then you have to send that to the design team of where you need to improve. They then have to think of it and design something that's going to be better, which you would have hoped they did in the first place anyway. So it's not easy to just creatively come up with something that's better in those areas. And then you have to actually make the thing, which takes another 3 to 8 weeks, depending on the team and what the resources they have and the money behind it because of the cost cap and all of this. And then you have to test it, and then they test it, and then they see that it doesn't work, and then you have to go back to the drawing board. It's so much more complex, and these things have to fit on the car, have to be on the regulations. And if it's something with the front wing, for example, that affects the airflow across the rest of the car, and you may not, even if it's better, it may not even work across the rest of the car. So it is so complex beyond the imagination, which is why they have so many people doing it. But it's incredible when you look at it, and that's in the season when the car's already made. Imagine the beginning of the season when in February there isn't a car. It's theoretical, right? And then they have to just put it together and hope that it works. it's incredible. I mean, I didn't know any of this before coming into cars, right? And I learned over time, and I sat there with some of the engineers going, how the fuck do you do this? Like, how does one department here, one department here, one department here all put something together and build something which works together? And of course it doesn't always, right? But I mean, everything it's I know it looks, from the outside, how can you make this mistake, how can you do that, it's so simple, it's blah blah blah. It doesn't work like that. It is so complex, and we can all sit there and say, it's like this, and some things are like that, I can agree on that, maybe strategies and stuff in hindsight. But when you put those cars together and you see the level they go to and the details and stuff, it gives you an appreciation for the whole thing.
I think Mercedes has been working on something before preseason testing, to be perfectly honest with you.
Probably.
Think we'll probably.
I mean, when you finally put that thing together,
yeah,
and you're not showing the show car on the launch, and you get that thing in the wind tunnel, or you get that thing on the 7-post rig, and you're able to see the weaknesses of it or the flex in certain areas, then you're already doing something before it's hit the track.
Yeah.
But again, you have to put it together, and there is no car until the beginning of the year. Like, it's not like they have this thing ready in September. It doesn't work like that. They don't have it, so they get it in February.
And they got to do 2 of them too, so there you go.
Well, a lot more than 2, to be honest, across the year, but yeah.
Replacement parts and everything else for it as well. Let's head on over to Twitter, because there's like a ton of questions for you, man.
Yeah, sorry, I know I was
No, this is great, man. This is great. I'll rattle through some of them.
Sure.
Might not be able to get to all of them, because I know I don't have you for long. But Stephen Clary asks, what was the most difficult aspect to adjust to from the Formula Series, and how has your first experiences on ovals compared to any advice you got to driving prior? So did you get any advice prior to going into ovals?
Okay, so with the racing in the junior formula to coming over here, firstly, it's like now a full professional series. You're against the best of the best in every team. There is someone who's been there a long time, right?
Yeah.
That's great to race against and to learn against, because they've got so much experience. Whereas in F2, yes, obviously, it's a competitive grid, right? And it was a competitive grid, but you're all kind of progressing at the same rate. It's not like you've got that benchmark who's been there for a long time. A couple of races, you have that with maybe De Vries, who was there for a couple of years, Latifi, and that. They were good benchmarks to see where you were kind of at compared to the year before. But now it's full professional. You're against the best of the best in the series we have. And then it's just the rate of the development is more. You can develop and play around with a bit more. Massive variation on circuit to circuit. I mean, look at it. We go from street circuit. Sorry, my camera's shaking. But street circuit, okay, St. Pete, to super speedway, Texas, to street circuit, Long Beach, to Barber, and then to super speedway in Indy 500, right? 5 or 6 races, all massively different.
Yeah.
And you're turning around cars, and you're having to adjust as a driver, adjust as a team. That's incredibly intense and tough. Then the other part of the question was, what was it? Hang on, I missed it. What was the second part of that?
Wanted to know if you got any advice prior to driving.
Yeah. Okay, so I had Hunter Ray for the first couple of ovals last year.
Oh, nice. That's the guy you want.
Yeah. So he obviously taught me a lot, but at the same time, you also have to get your own experience of it, because words only help so much. So it was great, but of course I had to understand it personally as well, and it's a big confidence thing to go out there and do it. So yeah, tough as the first experience, but I had great help on that side. I can't complain really. I kind of got on with it as good as I could in a certain way.
From Austin Kahn, this is actually a cool question. How different are the driving techniques between driving an IndyCar versus Formula 2 versus F1? Are many techniques transferable between the cars?
So I'm going to exclude F1. It's just it's a completely different car. Mechanically perfect to what it can be. Downforce is stupid. And you've got kind of all the tools to help you. So you've got everything with the differential, entry, mid, exit, high speed. You can change it all. You can change everything with the brakes to make it a bit easier for you and help you. Not we only have brake bias, or anything else you want to change, you have to do it after the session. Whereas that car, you can do everything in session. You can make it work a lot. F2 and IndyCar, very, very similar in a certain way, similar design, obviously executed slightly differently. Massively different engines. We went from single turbo to twin turbo, bit more power out the twin turbo here with the Chevy, and that is a lot more drivable than the single turbo. Single turbo was like, I had to come out the corner and go flat out, and then the boost would build with the turbo, and when I got to a certain point, I had to come off the throttle a bit to then come back on. Otherwise, there would be too much torque if I held it 100%. Okay. So you've got a throttle shape which goes to 100% and then back off and then back up, which is weird, and you have to get some experience for it. Whereas IndyCar is like a normal thing. You back to normal. So that was a bit of adjustment. We've obviously got the roll bars, adjustable roll bars, weight jackers for the ovals, which helps you fine-tune the car, and if it's out the window, you can kind of bring it back into a reasonable window. If you have to adjust a lot with it, you've got a bad car for that weekend anyway. Whereas F2, what you had is what you got. You had to make it work, especially on those kind of difficult tyres. That's the other thing, tyres. So super soft kind of understanding. You've got to really understand the Pirellis to make them work. Save the tyres like crazy in the race. You're driving around like 95% of the time, or 95% at the time, just to make the tyres last. Whereas IndyCar, it's, you get that sometimes where you have to preserve the tyres, but they're not your concern. You come out the pits and you're just flat out. Whereas F2, if I could relax a bit out the pits, I would. If I had no one behind me, I'd take it easy just to get the tyres working nicely, because they can grain, it just shoots you in the back basically if you get it wrong. And then the race is like 2 times longer, very competitive, much more pit stops. It's just mental. It's kind of crazy. You can be really on the back foot of the strategy first half of the race, and it can all turn in a split second just because you played the longer game or something. So that's a bit crazy for me, but they're both great series. F2 was super competitive. Racing was good. Okay, it was DRS racing, degradation racing with the tires, but it was good racing. And IndyCar is close, competitive. You really got to make a move and get past.
From that 52 car, who in the IndyCar paddock would you like to prank the most?
It would be Armstrong, but he's not going to. He's not racing at the 500, so I can't really get him. But once he starts racing on those ovals, he'll get an initiation, I think.
I thought you'd say Connor Daly.
Yeah, but I like Connor. I would, but I like Connor, and he's had it tough the last couple of years, so I think I'd cut him some slack. But yeah, maybe a little bit.
From Ryan. Ryan would like to know what your favorite moment in your IndyCar career has been so far.
Oh, the P2 in Laguna. I thought I had the pole. I did that lap and I was like, that must be pole. And then they're like, no, that's P2 by 200. So I was like, oh, come on. So that was a good moment. That was like a starting point for like what we could do.
From Is Race Week, do you ever get nervous before a race, like butterflies or chills, or do you get all of it?
If it's something new, I like, because I don't know what to expect. A little bit anxious kind of feeling. Nervous, no, because I learnt very early on in my career, like, whatever happens. You can't really change it once it's done. And I learnt that because a kart race, I'd qualified like on the front row 3 times in a row, 3 separate weekends, and some dickhead comes from the back and just takes you out 3 times in a row. And I was like, well, what more can I do? I've gone inside, I've gone outside. Every time I get taken out. And I learned after that, I was like, you can't change the situation and that. And sometimes you mess up, sometimes it's someone else. So, I just kind of approach it like that. If it goes well, it goes well. If it doesn't, we've got another weekend. And I think that works quite well psychologically for me. From
Alessia, what's it like to be back with Marcus? There you go.
Yeah, we're not in a relationship,
no,
but No, it's funny. I mean, it's good to have him here. It's good to share the experience with him. I think he's enjoying it a lot with Ganassi.
Did you guys ever live together?
Yeah, we lived together for a year in Italy. It was good fun. Look, I know him really well. He's a good guy. A bit strange, I have to say, but we're all strange in our own ways. But yeah, it's good fun.
From David, would you rather have a race where you make 10 overtakes to take the win but get disqualified, or a race where you avoid carnage to take just a podium?
So in my heart, I would love the first option where you go from 10 places back to win. But no one cares anymore about the journey you have. They care about the journey once you get the result, at the end of it all. You need the results, and that's something through my career where I always valued the journey more and the experience that you got, and then realized actually people only care about the results on the long term. Of course, some people care about the journey, right? And I would love more people too. But it's a story of life. No one gives a shit about what you've done until you've done it. That's the thing, and that's my quote of the day on that side. You've got to get the results, even if the journey is great and it helps you later in life. I would say I've been helped a lot by the journey I've done, but at some points in my life, having the results would have made a bigger difference than the learning that I got. But I could be surprised in 10 years. It could be the other way around and catch up on me.
From I think it's Katrin. I lot of hope. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, she's a big fan.
There you go. If you could add an international track to the IndyCar calendar, which one would it be? That's actually a good question.
Okay, I would say Silverstone.
Really?
That would be great.
In an IndyCar?
Yeah.
All right.
It's a home track. I mean, come on.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they did Brands Hatch years ago, so it's not impossible.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, actually, I don't know which series did that, but it was one of the
Champ
IndyCar
Car.
series.
Champ
Car. Okay,
my day, man. My day.
So you went there?
I didn't. I never got to go.
Oh, okay. But
didn't have the do re mi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, those overseas ones are a bit dear. But I think the best one, personally, excluding like the North America, South America type stuff, because that's a lot easier to do, would be Monza. Monza in an IndyCar.
That'd be cool.
That would be great.
Yeah. Jonathan Howe, last one for you. Can you describe or put into words how much tighter the midfield in IndyCar is on any given weekend compared to F1? I think the average F1 fan misunderstands that. So that's interesting, but I wouldn't even say midfield. I would say first place all the way back to 25th.
Yeah, I mean, like pretty much between first and 25th, depending on the weekend, is within 1 second, right?
Yeah.
And bearing in mind, you do have development in this series, okay, albeit with a smaller part of the car. Yeah. That's super impressive. I think there was one track last year where I think if I'd have improved a 10th, it would have jumped me up 11 spots, which is ridiculous. But that's the way it is. And of course, our qualifying format is quite strange, but a bit different, where you have two groups of 12, 13, 14. The fastest 6 out of those 2 then go into the fast 12. So you've got 12 cars, and then the fastest 6 out of those 12 then go into the final thing. And there's tyre strategies, all of this. It's not simple to get your head around, but it as a driver, it's a kind of good, quick way of getting through. It's super tight. It's like no mistakes. I nail those laps, and sometimes I'm P22, and that's the way it is. Yeah. Like the St. Pete, I nailed the lap. I come in, I go to my engineer, mate, this lap is good. And then he's like, yeah, I think we need a better car for this weekend. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm not going to be pissed, but it's just the way it is. That's how IndyCar is. You can just be slightly out the window and you're done. You make a mistake, you're not transferring. You're going to be P23, 24.
But you did finish P5, and I believe you're, still P5 in the championship as we tape this, right?
That helps after one race.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. Thanks very much for your time, Callum.
No worries.
Really appreciate that. Appreciate your time as well. It's Callum Ilott, driver for Juncos Hollinger Racing and IndyCar. Callum, thanks again for your time.
Thank you very much.